So we're going to talk about line. We're starting into the next chapter, and it deals with the visual elements and the principles of design. But the visual elements include things like line, shape, space, texture, color, that kind of stuff. And we're going to start with line. And there's three types of line that you need to know. One is actual line, which you're looking at now, and you can see that this is a big old work of art that's just completely dedicated to the use of movement and line in it. And this one is a work that was created. It's actually a print, so it's an engraving, and the line was used in this to create modeling and shading, because there are some types of artwork that you really can only work with line, like something like this, or a woodcut maybe, or like pen and ink. This is kind of a whole different idea, and it is that this is something I did a while back, and it's cut paper, and I like to do a lot of cut paper, and I just cut away and left the actual line. So you can see now, you can see how you can look right through it, and so that would be another way that actual lines could happen in a work of art. Psychic line is another one. So that deals with more of the psychological aspects of line. So it's like more like where people are looking, line of sight. That'd be a good way to think of it. So in this particular work, you can see that there are many different ways that people can move around. You can move around through a work of art because of where everybody's looking. The sight line between Adam and God in the creation of Adam might be probably the most famous sight line of all time. Edward Hopper, who did a lot of this kind of thing, where it's all about where people are looking, but the weird thing with his work is he never tells you where they're looking. This is another work by his. You can just kind of see how he uses that kind of line of sight all the time. Implied line are lines that are placed strategically in a work of art. So like you can see all these these little shapes were placed. Nobody drew a line there, but you still follow it. Connect the dots might be something that you think of with that. Just the placement of these streetlights creates a big line here, a big line here. And that's just by the placement of those shapes. There's not really a line there. They're all over the place, implied lines. It's just the way we, stack things up. This particular work has actual lines in it, but probably the strongest line is this curve that happens without a real line even being there. It's just the way these lines were cut off and aligned. This one, there really aren't two people looking at each other necessarily. It's just the way this vase is set up, and it makes it look like lines are there. Or like in this one, there is no circle, but it's just the way the shapes were cut to make you think it is a line. Type is a super strong line. We can see that in this. And you can have more than one. There's a lot of actual lines that happen in here. But like for instance over here, that's a super strong implied line that runs through there. In here you can see there's a real strong implied line, right, with the edge of the boat, but then there's also psychic lines where everybody's looking, and yet there's actual lines in her dress. It tells you that. Then, for example, if you look at this, you've got the outlines, but what is it, right? Well, it's super hard to tell without that descriptive information on the inside. Some things would be easy, like, a hand. If you drew around your hand, you might go, oh yeah, that's a hand. But other things, probably most, are really hard to tell what it is. And in this instance, you can see that it is a dish rack full of dishes, which you'd have probably never gotten there. Line direction would be the third one, or the second one. So we have line direction. And usually a work of art has a dominating direction of line in it. So for example, in this one, subcategory A is horizontal. So you can see there's a lot of horizontal lines in this work. Here's one and literally the horizon line is named for horizontal, right? And here, and horizontal lines always make you feel rather calm and peaceful. So even though these guys are rowing in this particular piece, it doesn't feel like it because it's dominated by such strong horizontal lines. And it gives you a sense of calm and peace and relaxation. Here's another good example, right? It's super relaxing and calm. Vertical, on the other hand, are lines that are assertive and aggressive sorts of lines, dominating lines, authoritarian lines. We think of when we think of vertical. Columns are super strong vertical lines, right? It's not a fluke that the Supreme Court has a bunch of vertical lines going up. It's meant to intimidate, right? It's meant to make you feel like they're all knowing, they're powerful. Diagonal lines are the movement lines in a work of art. So if you see where there's a lot of action, there's usually a lot of diagonal lines, and it feels very, I don't want to say confusing, but maybe like a lot of commotion. In this work, there is movement happening, and it is dominated by a strong diagonal line. It is Christ being removed from the cross, and they're lowering down this way. So there is still action. It's a little more quiet than the last one, but diagonal lines will make you feel that. You can have all three in a work of art. This work, you can see all three. Jesus is vertical. There's a strong horizontal line. See, he's just been resurrected, so he's coming out of the tomb. And then all the soldiers are asleep, and they've all kind of fallen into different angles, making more diagonals. But if that does happen, usually in a work of art, the dominant line will be the vertical. Vertical almost always dominates the other two. Okay, modeling and shading will be the next one. And in this work, you can see that the artist, Michelangelo, my favorite guy, is using hatching and cross-hatching. So hatching lines are lines that are parallel. You can see them right up here. Cross-hatching are lines that cross each other. So in the cheek, there's some really strong cross lines that happen here. And so he's used them both, but the further apart the lines are, right, the lighter it is, the closer the lines get, the darker it is. Sometimes you can only use hatching and cross-hatching in a work of art. For example, like pen and ink. This is a woodcut, and so for the large part, you're just going to see in something like a woodcut hatching lines. It's really hard to counter cross wood grain and create that, cross sections of lines. So most of the time you're going to see hatching lines where they're just next to each other, or little dots like down in here. Usually you don't cross them in a woodcut. This one I'm throwing in because I don't know where else to put it, and that's pointillism or stippling in a work of art, and that's just laying little dots closer to each other. So the work you're looking at right now is dots. I'll get closer, you can see them better, so you can see all those little dots in here, right down there for his hair. So it's almost impossible to even see them. Your eyes blur them all together. This work is one that he did as well, and from out here it just looks perfectly blended. But to see the little dots that he did, if you look up here in the hair, right, now you can see them. So it usually pointillism creates a super subtle movement. Speaking of movement, sometimes lines are used to get people to go where they want in a work of art. So for example, in this one, the focal point is right in here, and the artist gets you to do that by using strong psychic lines. Everyone in the work is looking here. And he even has a really strong implied line that comes through here and suggests, and kind of makes a slippery slope down to there, so you're falling with gravity down there. Movement can also be kind of suggested by line, and this is something I did a while back to show. I added the line in around the butterflies to show the movement of the butterfly migration or line, so you get a sense that there's a lot of motion in it. Pattern and texture is going to be super important for your work coming up for your project. Patterns are repeated motifs or small pictures or shapes or something that repeat in a pre-ordered sequence. So you would look at it and you go, yep, this is what's coming up next. So you can see that like these lines create a pattern because, right, the space between them is equal and identifiable. So you expect that line to happen again. You have to have that kind of expected line to happen. By the way, that dog is super cute. Anyway. In this one, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. It creates a pattern. In this one, you don't see a pattern, right? It's just random lines. That would be texture. So that's the difference.